I want to talk about a controversial death penalty case in China. As you know, human rights is one of the main things I tend to focus on, and I have no regrets for that. It's who I am, and it's what I care about. It's one of the things I care about. So I've just been reading a report about a woman in China who was sentenced to death for murdering her husband, but this is the background of the case. The Supreme Court in China, I'm reading this from the BBC, has overturned a death sentence against a woman who killed her husband after months of domestic abuse. The brother of Li Yan told reporters that her case was being reheard. Li Yan beat her husband Tan Yong to death in 2010 in a high-profile case that elicited much public sympathy. Shortly after they married in 2009, Tan began beating and kicking Li. He also stubbed out cigarette butts on her face and chopped off part of a finger. Li Yan, 43, had complained about the abuse to local police and community officials, but no action was taken. In November 2010, the Sichuan native killed her husband during a fight, hitting him with the butt of an air rifle that Lee's lawyer says. Mr. Tan had threatened to shoot her with and dismembered his body. I'll read that again. In November 2010, the Sichuan native killed her husband during a fight, hitting him with the butt of an air rifle that Lee's lawyer says Mr. Tan had threatened to shoot her with and dismembered his body. She was caught after a friend she confided in tipped off the police. Evidence of her abuse was presented in court, but the courts ruled that it was not enough to prove that she was a victim of domestic violence and sentenced her to death in 2011. Li Yan appealed against the death sentence on self-defense grounds, but the appeal was rejected by the Sichuan High Court. Amnesty International, as well as lawyers, scholars and non-governmental groups, sent in petitions calling on the courts to reconsider. And there's further information here that death sentences are usually carried out within a week of a Supreme Court decision in China. So when she was sentenced to death in January 2013, that's when the activism began. There's a few things I want to say about this case. First of all, what this woman must have went through is absolutely horrendous. I think that domestic violence is absolutely abhorrent. To treat someone like that you supposedly love is absolutely disgusting. I mean, if this guy put out cigarette butts on her face, that's just hard to imagine. I believe he did, because domestic violence is a real problem, but it's just utterly abhorrent. And the fact that she went to police and they basically ignored her is an utter disgrace, and that shows that domestic violence needs to be taken much more seriously in China. It also highlights a serious flaw with the death penalty in China, but wider issues. There is an attitude that if you commit murder, then you should be executed. That is often the public excuse in many countries, not just China, in the US as well, where the death penalty still exists. The problem with that is it doesn't take into circumstances whereby people may well be defending themselves, and this seems like a clear-cut case. Now, to be fair, the report does say that there was public outcry over this, so that's a good thing. And the fact that government is trying to reduce death penalty cases is also something to be welcomed. But the fact remains that China executes far too many people, and it is conceivable that there is women before who have been executed for similar reasons. I'm not saying always that's the case. There may well be female criminals who kill people out of greed or whatever, but if this woman was sentenced to death, it is very conceivable, when you consider the thousands of people executed in China every year, that there is other similar cases, and that's an absolute abomination. So I believe the Chinese system needs to really take this on board and learn from this case. I'm not so naive as to say, oh well, China should abolish the death penalty overnight, and I also acknowledge that there's two sides to the death penalty argument, but personally I'm against the death penalty, and personally I really hope that China can learn from this case, because this woman should never have got the death sentence in the first place. She was defending herself from a violent man, and it's just an abomination that she was sentenced to death. In my view, that's becoming a victim twice. So it's good that she's been reprieved, but I really hope China can learn from this.